Okay, welcome to this edition of Development Dialogue. Development Dialogue is a series of conversations with experts in specific domains. True to the spirit of interdisciplinary research in MIDS, this series will feature a variety of speakers and conversations, taking stock of issues in key areas and identifying possible directions for future research. Today, we have Professor Pinaki Chakraborty. Professor Pinaki Chakraborty has a distinguished career of more than 25 years of teaching and research experience. Currently, he is Honorary Visiting Professor, National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, NIPFP, Delhi. Prior to that, he held positions as the Director of NIPFP, Delhi, in Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum, and has worked with various committees with the government as well as multilateral agencies like the Asian Development Bank. Professor Pinaki's work focuses on major issues in India's public finances. He has vast experience in teaching, research, and policy advice in public finances at various levels at different states and as advisor to the Finance Commission and the Union government. Welcome, Professor Pinaki.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, Dr. Suresh Babu. I'm delighted to be.
Okay. Professor Pinaki, the issue of resource sharing between union and states is always a matter of contention. And given this background, what is your assessment of the finances of the state governments in India? Are there structural issues that are left addressed? And what is causing these frictions, which are constant now?
Well, I think there is certainly tension between union and states in terms of their relationship as far as resource devolution is concerned. But if we look at the constitutional provision and devolution of resources, I think there's a broad dimension of stability, yet there has been changes happening time to time based on recommendations of various finance commission as well as Indian government introducing schemes to finance particular kind of expenditure. So I would say that broad trend continues to be the same, but we do see a lot of discussion, a lot of tensions about sharing of resources between the union and states. But if we look at aggregate flow of resources, I don't see anything has changed in recent years. As far as the question of revenue assignment is concerned, and if I say that's a concern, I think that concern is because of the seventh schedule of the Constitution, and that was done, I think, based on who can collect what kind of taxes, and most of the mobile tax bases are with the union government to stop interjurisdictional mobility of people based on tax rate. So that issue is constitutional. So, and that's there in all the federations. But in our case, what makes it more difficult in terms of in terms of managing this complex relationship between the union and state is the large diversity in income across states. I think that kind of diversity is rare among federal nations. So one is an issue of horizontal inequality arising because of the difference in capita income across states that can give different kind of tensions. And second question is fiscal stability of some of the states who have got large income, large revenue, yet they have got large expenditure commitment. So this is a continuous process, but management of it would always be complex because we are continuously evolving and making the system work in a dimension which faces three most critical challenges. One is urbanization, second is migration, because migration also requires more resources from the union to the states, or the states will have to make provisions of such issues if there is no resource available from the union. I think these are the issues as an evolving country we are going to face as we move forward. I also wanted to highlight, when you talk about tension, I think it's more horizontal in many cases, because if you look at the country's GDP, you see 50% of the GDP comes from 7 or 8 states. So that way we do not have convergence of income. But fiscal needs across states are rising very rapidly because of the rising aspirations and other needs. For example, climate. We are going to face these challenges more and more, and we have to address these issues as we move forward.
Okay. Um, Professor Pinaki, you were one of the early researchers to comment on GST. I remember your book sometime back titled as GST in India, Simple Tax in a Complex Federal System. Now, you see, over time, GST revenues have been increasing. And we find that the compensation to states have stopped. So what has been the effects of the implementation of GST on states' finances? And I would also like to know your views on the inclusion of petrol and liquor to GST list.
On GST, yes, I think GST was a shift from a tax system which was less harmonized. That means there was more tax competition among the states. States decided voluntarily to move to a system called VAT in 2005, and that was a significant loss of fiscal autonomy. But there was no constitutional amendment required at that point in time, because we were only reforming the indirect taxes that was there in states' domain, part of the indirect taxes. But when GST came, issue became more complex because it required a constitutional amendment, and the GST Council became then a constitutional authority to decide on the structure of GST. So if we talk about GST, I think GST has resulted in significant loss of fiscal autonomy to the states. Of course, it has reduced autonomy of the center also, but given that states' primary source of revenue was VAT, so compared to center, because center has got income taxes, customs, etc. So states' loss of fiscal autonomy was more than the center. So that's a tension that would continue to remain as long as we have GST. I think the states, the best part of the whole thing is that knowing fully well that it will result in significant loss of fiscal economy, states want give priority to tax harmonization and then the fiscal autonomy. So that's also shows the maturity of the Indian federal system. So states thought that it is very important for growth, important for simplifications of the tax system. So let's give up autonomy, and we expect the higher growth, and higher growth will result in higher revenue. So that was the basic first principle of having GST. The second principle was, okay, if we are actually harmonizing a tax system, some states will lose, some states will gain, because tax rates have become same after GST. So in order to ensure that the transition is smooth, so there was a 5-year compensation that was given by the union through a constitutional amendment. So to ensure certainty of revenue. In between, COVID came, so central government had to borrow and give money to the states because that kind of revenue was not available. I think after GST, after 5 years, I think 2022 July, this has stopped, compensation has stopped. But we don't see a significant fall in revenues of the states post GST. I think GST compensation has really created a major shock to the broad system. I think individual states has to study, but if we look at the aggregate fiscal deficit, revenue deficit number and tax GDP ratio, we don't see compensation had actually with a we don't see compensation resulted in a major shock to the fiscal systems of the states. So states have been able to manage, this transition well, but I think there are certain states where GST revenue was not buoyant for a considerable period of time, and that weakened their finances also. So it's a now that the GST revenue started improving in the last 2 3 years, hopefully it will stabilize more. But at the same time, I would also like to say that our GST is still very complicated because there are multiple rates. We have got I think 5 rates. And I hope the future reform of GST actually should move to a more simple system where we should not have more than 3 rates. So that's a matter of negotiation between the states and the union. It will not be easy, but I think we should move to a more simplified GST structure. Now, on the question of petroleum, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that this the reform, the bringing petroleum into the GST structure would then mean further loss of fiscal autonomy to the states. Now, if we look at, and it will also be a loss of fiscal autonomy for the union. And as we had seen in recent past, there was this major discussions, and again another tension between the union and states about center continuously imposing taxes on petroleum product in the form of cess and surcharges, and states then topping it up with their own taxes to garner more and more revenue. Why? Because that is the only autonomous fiscal space available for both the union and the states. So in a situation where you really cannot tax a large part of indirect taxes without going to the GST Council, and you have got a significant amount of revenue coming from a non-elastic revenue sector called petroleum sector, you'd certainly be taxing it more and more. So whether it is efficient, economically neutral, whether it is creating a distortion in the growth in price and inflation, we really don't in the short run take that into consideration. What becomes more important is daily management of finances, and if it gives you more revenue, I would certainly do that. So if petroleum will have to be brought in to the GST structure, I think there has to be some flexibility in the GST design also. Without that, it will be very, very difficult to have that grand bargain with the states.
Okay. Now, on a related note, Professor Pinaki, is there a tendency of the union intruding to the subjects of the states?
Subject of the states in the sense, are you talking about CSS?
And also activities otherwise which would have been in the concurrent list, the center is pushing states out?
Yes.
Is there a tendency towards that?
I think there are a couple of issues. It's not about pushing states out and center taking over that space. I think this has happened because of a couple of reasons. One is, CSS, if we look at, was a reform that started in the early 90s. We had 200 plus CSS center intervening in every area of state intervention. Constitutionally, if you look at the state list, more than 70% of the social sector spending, more than 80% of the economic services spending in rural development, agriculture, etc., are in the domain of states. But there are central schemes in all these areas. So naturally, when we say that center is also having schemes in these areas, you are actually competing in a functional space which is overlapping. But constitutionally, there is no bar on that. But it can create tension, and that tension is always there. Now, there has been significant reform in CSS also. From 200 plus CSS, we have now brought it down to 28. But I think the volume of money that still goes in the form of CSS is significant. So that is one issue that needs to be actually discussed and a solution found. Why we need a solution? Because if we are putting large amount of money in the form of CSS, and since CSS is on a co-sharing basis, So actually, I am tying up state resources to central schemes. So that is a significant loss of fiscal autonomy. So what is fiscal autonomy at the state level? We need to rework in terms of its magnitude meaning availability of untied resources, by taking out what state is contributing to the CSS because of the continuous increase in the volume, quantum of CSS grants given by the union. So that is a tension. I would say tension, but I think that's a concern that requires to be addressed. I think with CSS there's a mixed feeling. Okay, if this money directly comes to a particular department in the state, they are also happy sometimes. So there are a lot of issues. But then also the question is, should center not intervene in areas where there is a need? I think constitutionally there is no bar, and center should intervene in certain areas where which has got two basic characteristics. I think one is national priority. So if we say that poverty will have to be reduced and it's a national priority, and center has to ensure that poverty is reduced every year, center should have a scheme. That's the first point. Second is there are schemes which have got externalities. So if you have positive externalities or you want to reduce the negative externalities, you can have a central scheme. But with these two principles, if we restrict CSS intervention, I think we would be able to resolve this issue of CSS and core sharing, whether it is 40 or 60 or 65 or 735. I think we actually discuss CSS, but it ultimately boils down to the core sharing. I think we need a framework of center withdrawing from CSS, giving more autonomy to the states about what they want or what the states want to do. I think one way to go about it also is to create flexible pool. Today we have a a small sum of money as flexible pool within the CSS. But I think that's very, very small. So I think it is very important to have flexible school so that states who have done first generation reform move forward. I think the kind of issues they have now, they can actually design their own scheme and draw money from that flexible pool. I think if we make CSS more flexible in terms of its design, I think absorption will be based on the need of a state rather than one size fits all intervention by the union. I think that's the reform that we should do in the area of CSS, so that this concurrent list, state list, and union list discussions becomes very focused on externality and national priorities.
Okay. For the benefit of our listeners, CSS is centrally sponsored schemes. On the same line, Professor Pinaki, there are discussions about FRBM. It was revisited once. Now, is it time for another revisit? There is also the question of CSS, as you mentioned. There is also debates about a lot of direct transfers that are done by the center. There is also the discussion about freebies, which is often a major kind of a point of debate. Given this scenario, is there a case for an independent fiscal council for a federal setup like India?
Well, I think you raised a couple of very important issues. And I just take two things. I think one is the FRBM, other is the freebies. I think FRBM has been significantly diluted over time. I think FRBM is no longer after COVID. During COVID and after COVID, there has been a lot of relaxation given to FRBM. It has also been made, reform oriented. Like if you do power sector reform, we will get extra money to borrow, etc. So that's one set of reform that has taken place. How it has worked, whether that is desirable, I think there needs to be some examination of it, a very careful examination of it, because we are now having a debt to GDP ratio which is above 80% of India's GDP. Though it has come down after COVID sharply, but I think it's still very high. Interest payment liabilities are very high if you take center and states together, particularly center's liability is very high. I think it's very important that we look at this issue and try to find out what should be the nature of FRBM, say for the next 5 to 6 years. So I think that's very important. I think we are not having that discussion at all. Also, another issue that is very important in the context of FRBM is the issue of rising revenue deficit of states. Now, this revenue deficit increasing means, capital expenditure coming down. Since state spends almost two-thirds of country's capital expenditure in the public sector, I think that can have its own adverse consequence for public investment and can have its impact on both growth as well going forward. So I think revenue deficit reduction is very important. On the freebies, I think the discussions was without major evidences collected by the whoever has talked about freebies. I think in a situation where 1 year back or 2 years back, I think when we are moving from COVID to COVID, we are getting out of COVID. I think there are a lot of transfers that were made. I think we cannot forget that context. So globally, I think there were a lot of household level transfer happened. In India also it happened somewhere, it happened more somewhere, it happened less. But to say that it has destabilized finances, my understanding of the data is that it hasn't. So there hasn't been any significant change in states' fiscal imbalances as far as the deficit is concerned. The deficit level is now at around 3% of GDP, 3.2, 3.4. Even 224-25 budgets, if you look at 4, 5, 7, 8 major states, I think it is not very different compared to the pre-COVID level. What is important is the rising debt, and debt has increased during COVID because a large amount of money was given as fiscal deficit, borrowing, etc., etc. But at the same time, I think if we are talking about freebies and whether that can be freebies, center-state relations, FRBM can be managed by an independent fiscal council, I think that scope is very limited. I think that will be another layer of bureaucracy, there is no technical solution to the fiscal problem. So if an independent fiscal council comes and says that, well, this is not correct or this is correct, I think how seriously that will be taken, I have no idea. Second issue is that independent fiscal council is pushed by IMF, and it's a kind of a situation where I think I don't know whether I should say this, but I think it's like one size fits all. Sometimes lack of ideas also, because if we look at 59 countries that have got the independent fiscal council, in 30 plus countries, it was because of an IMF loan, because IMF put that as a conditionality. So everywhere you create another layer of bureaucracy or a technical technocracy to fix fiscal problem. I think it's not going to work. And secondly, I think what is most important is I I always say that how many times we have great discussions on budget in state assemblies or in the parliament. How many times the parliamentary standing committee report on finance is discussed. I think these are important institutions which have worked to actually debate, discuss public financial issues in the parliament. So if we are talking about an independent fiscal council, which is going to solve a problem which has not been solved by the existing institutional structure, I think is asking probably for moon. So that's my view and understanding of the issue of independent fiscal council.
Yeah, my query was in the context of this whole discussions about the center putting a cap on states' borrowing limits. What could be a mechanism to deal with those kind of situations then?
Yeah, no, I understand. I fully understand the issue of how much state should borrow is determined by the FRBM Act, initiated by the 12th Finance Commission, implemented and monitored by the central government. So in such a situation, an independent fiscal council would only create further tension. That's the point I'm trying to see, because it is developed by the Finance Commission, implemented by the Union government, followed by state governments. Now we are bringing a fourth party called Independent Fiscal Council. I'm not too sure whether that is going to solve the problem or going to complicate the problem. That's the point I was trying to make.
Okay. Moving on to more recent changes. The 16th Finance Commission has started consultations. What is your take on the terms of references? Some say it is too short. Some say it is broad and open enough to encompass a lot of issues. Would like to hear from you.
Both the views are correct. But I would like to go back to the history a bit. I think Finance Commission's terms of reference used to be very brief once upon a time, but it started expanding slowly after liberalization because economy became very complex. A lot of issues were also evolving, and in the process, there was Finance Commission steward that got expanded. This time, it has been the constitution, pure constitutional TOR that has been given to the commission, and nothing has been referred to the commission in the interest of sound finance, as the constitution says. So that way, the commission's view would depend on how commission looks at it. Whether they look at it as they take an expansive view of the TOR or they take a very restrictive view of the TOR. But I think for the commission, that's my assessment. I do not know. But given that we are still emerging out of the COVID shock, there are new challenges that are there after COVID at the state and the union level. Commission will have to take these factors into consideration to develop a framework of devolution, develop a framework of grant, and probably develop a framework of fiscal responsibility for both the union and states. So in such a situation, commission, even if the commission wants, I think commission will not be able to restrict its mandate to only a set of issues that actually affect fisc and the macro management, the union and the state level.
Okay.
So by default, it will be an expansive view. That's what I feel.
Okay. Okay. What, according to you, are the major challenges before the 16th Finance Commission?
I think the most important challenge for the Finance Commission is the high level of debt and deficit of the union government and the states. The states not deficit but debt. Debt remains at around 28-29% of GDP. FRBM review committee said that it should be 20% of GDP by 2023. So how do you reduce debt in the next 5-6 years? So I think Commission needs to give a path, and in turn a new FRBM framework which brings this to a sustainable level. Second issue is, I think for the issue of debt is an issue of general government debt management. It's not only states, because states debt is only 35% of the total debt that the union and states have to aggregate union and state debt. So in such a situation, I think you can continue to give a framework of reduction of state debt, but aggregate debt will not come down as fast if centers debt does not decline. So how do you reduce centers debt will be a major issue that Finance Commission has to deal with, to decide on a framework of fiscal responsibility for the union and state, and in turn for the general government. That's the one issue that Commission will have to face. Second important issue, I think, for commissions, if you look at last 4-5 Finance Commission, has always had a perspective on the growth of the economy in the next 5 years. I think we are facing a very uncertain macroeconomic environment. It is more uncertain than what it used to be probably during the global financial crisis, and that time the 13th Finance Commission was in office. So how do you see Indian economy evolving in the medium term, in the next 5-6 years? That would also determine how do you estimate revenue, how do you estimate expenditure responsibilities, how do you estimate the debt profile, etc. So Finance Commission will have to take a very, very careful view of growth of the economy. The third issue that I think Finance Commission will have to consider, but they are not required to, because there is no TOR related to that. I think we are talking about climate. And if we look at 13th, 14th, and 15th Finance Commission, there has been significant focus on climate responsive, kind of a climate responsive incentive for transfers, because 14th and 15th had given forest cover some weightage, 13th Finance Commission had given a conditional grants for climate, etc. I think every time when climate came in the intergovernmental fiscal relation, you only look at the revenue side. Okay, give some grants, give some revenue transfers. But I think climate is more about making investments. So it's about expenditure. So I think an aggregate view of what is the forward looking changes that we should do to deal with climate issues. And for that, what will be the additional resource requirement for the next 4 5 years? Because 80% of the climate financing is at the public sector, mostly by the government. So in such a situation, what would be the additional resource requirement, and how do you make a framework for that? Resource mobilization will be an important issue for the Finance Commission to consider.
Okay. There is also a kind of an debate or an argument that the states are not constituting finance commissions on a timely basis. Their reports are awaited at times, and that's causing some kind of a delay in understanding states' finances. And what is your take on that?
Yeah, state finance commissions, I think, except few states, 6, 7 states, including yeah, and I think all the southern states have done very well. I think in terms of progress of decentralization, I think the State Finance Commission's role performance and its intervention in taking sub-state decentralization forward is really not something that was envisaged in the with the 73rd, 74th constitutional amendment happened. I think a lot needs to be done in improving the State Finance Commission's operation as a body which governs state-local relationship. Second issue, I think, is the issue of sub-state decentralization and scale. I think scale becomes very important. We have to be realistic when we talk about sub-state decentralization. If we have 250,000 local governments in the country, and if we are saying that every local government is going to become, an economic hub or a social hub, I think that we are actually completely ignoring the scale. I think that's unimaginable to happen. That's not possible to happen. But what is important that to consider is that core functions of the of the panchayats or the local governments. For that, the resources required should be provided for key basic services, 7, 8 basic services that a local government does. I think for that also resources are not available in many states. I think if as a first step we are able to do that in the country, I think that would make a significant difference to the quality of public service delivery. I think Finance Commission should try to create a framework. I think 15th has done it. They created an incentive structure where if a state hasn't constituted the State Finance Commission, they would not get the entry level grant, etc. So those things are steps towards nudging the states to take Finance Commission at the state level more seriously. But I think what is most important, even if the finance commissions are constituted on a regular basis, quality of the recommendation and how that recommendation is actually making resources available, provide key basic services, not the 29 functions that was devolved the 74th amendment, but certain key basic services that they're able to do as a first step can really help improve delivery of services.
Professor Pinaki, for the benefit of my young researchers here, what, according to you, are the interesting theoretical and empirical issues for research in Indian public finances at the moment?
Okay, thank you for asking that question. I think if I am a research scholar, a PhD scholar, I think I would first work on something on migration and its pressure on risk at the state level. So I think migration and urbanization is becoming a major issue in fiscal management, because it impacts delivery of services, and continuously you have to make investment. So how migration and fiscal equalization can play a major role in managing the pressure of migration. I'd like people to work on that, young scholars to work on that. Second issue that I would like to uh, say on the at the theoretical level, I think there has not been any major work in India on direct taxes. So what are the theoretical developments in direct taxation? What are the issues that we should be addressing going forward in personal income taxes globally? We have been talking about it, but we haven't really done very. We need to do more on direct taxes front. I think that is something which I would like people to work on and think about it. Third issue that is becoming very important is the issue of fiscal responsibility and legislative control over borrowing, etc. How these rules have worked, what are the major thinking on fiscal rules and new fiscal institutions, that framework globally. I think if somebody analyzes and comes out with good research, I think that will be very useful. I think IMF provides a data called Independent Fiscal Council data set, and also the data on fiscal rules across countries. So that's a fascinating data set, and a lot of important research can be done by looking at how fiscal rule operates in different countries. What are the preconditions for a successful fiscal rule, and also then look at if the rule has to operate and provide flexibility, how that can be done. So international understanding of that would be very useful for policy, as well as good empirical academic research. Last issue that I would like students to consider is the issue of climate change and public policy with a completely from a fiscal lens, and what are the issues that is going to make fisc prepare for to deal with investment that is required to deal with climate change would be very interesting.
Well, thank you, Professor Pinaki, for taking time off from your busy schedule and talking to us. Thank you so much. Now we have exactly 7 minutes more, and I would invite questions from the other fellow attendees. Someone called Hubert has already raised hand. Can you please, Hubert, introduce yourself and your question?
Sure. My name is Hubert. I'm friend of MITS. I attended many programs over there. I've been very closely associated. I'll come directly to the question to you, sir, Mr. Dr. Chakraborty. Sir, there is, finance sharing between state and center. Now, there is some sort of bias or prejudices that it is a partiality for some states, and some states there's a different partiality. Is it happening, or is it just blown up? Number one. Number two, sir, is that presume that I'm a common man. When will the gas price come down? That's all.
Okay. I think when we talk about discrimination, penalization, etc., I think we need to look at three things. I think 70% of the total transfers to the state is happening to the Finance Commission formula. And that's determined by the Finance Commission, which is an independent body set up by the constitutional body. And Government of India follows the Finance Commission's recommendations to give money to the state. So there is no question of discrimination or penalization there. So that's not. A state can say that I got less, and that can be true, but that does not mean that state has been discriminated. So that's the first part of the argument. So you can be always unhappy with the recommendation, but no state has said that Finance Commission has done something which is not right. So that distinction has always will have to be made when we say there is discrimination, penalization. Now, if a state share goes down, for example, if we take Tamil Nadu, its share has continuously declined in the last 4-5 finance commission. This has got an implication for fiscal stability of the state because they were earlier getting say 100 crores, now they are getting say 50 crores. So that they have to make that money available. Now, and if the state is not able to do it, then there is an increase in debt, increase in deficit, etc. I think those state-specific issues will have to be addressed because macro stability is a central concern. If a state becomes fiscally weak, that has implications for national growth also. Because Tamil Nadu is also a very large state. I'm just taking Tamil Nadu as example, not because I'm speaking in MIBS, but it has happened to Tamil Nadu because its share has come down. So over time, similar situation has happened with Bihar. So Bihar's share also has significantly declined over time. So I think these are state-specific issues where I think there is specific intervention that needs to be made if it is creating fiscal instability, because we cannot afford fiscal instability in the system. So that is different than saying that there is a discrimination. I think there is no discrimination. As far as the gas price is concerned, I have no idea when it is going to come down. But I can certainly say that it is not going to go up till the election is over.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
More questions? We have 3 more minutes.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, Prashant.
Prashant Kumar. So, sir, I have put a question in the chat box also. So, sir, I want to ask about when the central and state ministries directly funds instead of funding the PRIs to to the programs like Jal Jeevan Mission and others. From the state finances point of view, how can we put more emphasis on the local governments directly funding in case instead of making other arrangements, can we at the local government's decentralization point of view, how the financial is going to be in future, and how can we think about this?
Prashant, I will read out the question because the voice was breaking. The question is that
Okay,
the pseudo government funding by central ministries directly instead of funding local government like PRIs, how can the state's role be changed from financing point of view? For example, direct funding in Jal Jeevan Mission in rural water supply, etc.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I had actually addressed this question when we talked about, CSS. I think there is a need to restrict CSS to limited activities and make resources available to the states to their own program. But at the same time, certain key sectors where there has to be a central intervention should be based on, as I said, positive externalities, national priorities, and also to control negative externalities. So there are a lot of focus on water these days, and there are new schemes that has come up in the water sector. What I'm trying to say is that if we are really talking about a framework of intervention, and that framework of intervention should not be changing every now and then. So we need to have a continuous framework of that intervention. And we said the center will be spending on these things for the next, say, there has to be a sunset clause. I'll be spending next couple of years because CSS also has a problem. So you are talking about Jal Jeevan Mission. Now, Jal Jeevan Mission is there at the local level. Now, people who are working on Jal Jeevan Mission, if the mission is stopped, ultimately they will become a state government responsibility. So their salaries, the establishment expenditure goes up. So CSS, even if it stops, it does not go away from the state's responsibility. So the CSS has a continuous impact on state budget even after the CSS has ended. So that's a major issue. I think these are the issues that we need to find out, quantify, and then say that, this is sometimes may not be, some of the schemes may not be sustainable. But I'm never saying the center has no role in national priorities. That role always there, and there's a nice framework that was provided by the Port and Finance Commission on cooperative federalism. Kindly read that chapter.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Pinaki. I think it is time to close. There's one more question that has come up from Mr. Ravi Ganapati. Would you like to raise this question?
Yes, sir. Our speaker rightly mentioned that from the 11th Finance Commission onwards, the issue continues. I hope my suggestion is the Finance Commission must take into account while allocating resource for the states. Performing states must not be punished. Take, for example, number one, the population. That may be the best example. So the population is reduced by, it is because of the center's advice. So now the state government, of course, the speaker rightly mentioned, it must be discussed in parliament. If it is not discussed in parliament, I am recommending to the 16th Finance Commission, at least it was mentioned the Ramraj, 11th Finance Commission onwards, 3 chief ministers from the south, no? But it is not so. From 11th Finance Commission to the 15th Finance Commission, our finance minister, the present finance minister also rightly mentioned, while answering one question, it must be discussed in parliament because it is a statutory body. Finance Commission is a statutory body, so that must be changed. This is my polite request to the 16th Finance Commission, sir. Thank you. Very good. Very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think we have come to the end of today's episode of Development Dialogue. I thank Professor Pinaki Chakraborty for such an engaging conversation with us. And I thank all of you for joining. And we will be back with another episode of Development Dialogue. And all these episodes of Development Dialogue is available on the MIDS's YouTube channel. So you're most welcome to go back and listen it again. Yeah, thank you very much. And please do stay tuned. We'll be back with another episode. Thank you, Professor Pinaki.
Thank you. Thank you.